The morning light filtered gently through the blinds as Captain Ayan Farid, a 45-year-old seasoned Muslim pilot, opened his eyes before the alarm had a chance to ring. It had been years since he needed an alarm. His body clock had been trained by decades of discipline, dawn prayers, and early flights. Yet, despite his routine, there was a quiet heaviness inside him, a quiet ache he had learned to live with. Some wounds, he often said to himself, do not bleed on the outside. Ayan stood beside his bed for a moment, breathing deeply. The familiar calm of Fajr time wrapped around him, the kind of tranquility only those who rise before sunrise truly understand. He walked to the bathroom, performed wudu, and unfurled his prayer mat. As he raised his hands and whispered, Allahu Akbar, his heart softened in a way it never did anywhere else. Prayer was the one place where the world could not reach him. 7 years ago, he had lost his elder brother, Hassan, a man who had practically raised him after their father died young. The shock of that night still lingered like a shadow over Ayan's chest. Hassan had been strong, healthy, smiling one moment, and gone the next. A heart attack. Sudden. Cruel. Unforgiving. Ayan had been flying a long-haul route at the time and landed only to receive the news. Since that day, guilt and helplessness, two invisible enemies, had taken permanent residence within him. Yet Ayan never abandoned Allah. He never let the wound turn into rebellion. Instead, he held on to faith even tighter. 5 prayers a day. Sudden du'as whispered under his breath. Long silences spent staring at the sky, asking the one who controls it to give him strength. He carried grief, but grief never carried him. His wife, Mariam, stepped into the living room as he folded his prayer mat. Her face was gentle even in sleepiness. "You have an early flight today?" she asked softly. "To Dubai," he replied. "Routine flight. I'll be back before midnight." She nodded, then said the words she always said before any journey. "May Allah protect you in the skies and bring you back safely." Ayan smiled. Mariam never knew how much those simple words meant. She was not the type of woman who cried loudly or begged dramatically. She prayed quietly, consistently, lovingly, like a woman who understood the unseen shields built by sincere prayer. After breakfast with their 2 teenage children, Ayan grabbed his uniform cap, kissed Mariam's forehead, and stepped outside. The morning breeze was cool, carrying with it the scent of wet earth. He paused for a moment, looking up at the sky, the vast space he spent his life mastering. Pilots were trained to trust their instruments, their training, their calculations. But Ayan believed something else too. A pilot flies with skill, yes, but lands safely only by the will of Allah. At the airport, crew members greeted him with respect. His reputation was one of precision, calmness, and fairness. Younger pilots often said they learned more from one flight with Ayan Farid than from weeks of classroom training. Today's co-pilot, Ahmed, a 30-year-old quick-thinking first officer, approached with a cheerful smile. "Captain Ayan, ready for another smooth one?" "Inshallah," Ayan replied. They walked into the cockpit together. Ayan's second home, the place where he felt both powerful and humble at the same time. As he ran his fingers over the controls, checking switches, screens, and gauges, a subtle uneasiness touched his heart. Nothing alarming, just a quiet whisper of discomfort without a clear reason. He pushed the feeling aside. Every pilot had days like that. But today the uneasiness was not random. It was the beginning of something Ayan could not foresee. Something that would test his training, his courage, and above all, his faith. The aircraft door closed with a muted thud, and Captain Ayan Farid glanced at the digital clock above the windshield. Everything was moving exactly on schedule. Ground crew gave the thumbs-up signal, the passengers settled in, and the air inside the cockpit hummed with the calm rhythm of routine flight procedures. Yet the quiet uneasiness from earlier, small, almost unnoticeable, still lingered somewhere deep inside his chest. Co-pilot Ahmed strapped in, adjusting the overhead switches with practiced ease. "Passengers are all seated, Captain. Cabin crew ready for departure." "Good," Ayan replied, his tone steady and professional. He pressed the intercom and spoke to the passengers with a warmth that always comforted people, even on flights full of turbulence. "Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. We are ready for departure and expecting a smooth flight today. May Allah bless our journey with ease." It was a simple sentence, offered almost casually, but a few passengers smiled when they heard it. To some, faith from a pilot meant reassurance. To others, it was simply a reminder that beyond all human skill, there is a higher power watching over every traveler in the sky. The engines roared to life. Ayan guided the plane gently onto the runway. The long strip of asphalt stretched ahead like a silent invitation to the open skies. As the engines hit full thrust, the aircraft accelerated, wheels lifting softly off the ground as if carried by invisible hands. Takeoff was flawless. The plane rose through a few layers of scattered clouds and emerged into brilliant blue. Sunlight poured through the cockpit windows, warm and golden. The world below shrank into a mosaic of tiny roads, moving dots, and fading city lines. Up here, everything looked peaceful, too peaceful to expect anything out of the ordinary. Climbing to 36,000 feet, Ahmed confirmed. Ayan nodded. Autopilot engaged. And for a moment, silence settled around them. The soft hum of the engines, the occasional scratch of a pen on a checklist. Ayan's fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. Then something subtle, almost gentle, stirred the air inside the cockpit. At first it was a scent. Not strong, not sudden. Just a faint, delicate fragrance that did not belong inside a sealed, mechanically controlled aircraft flying high above the world. Ayan sniffed slightly, expecting perhaps the lingering smell of coffee from a flight attendant. But no, this was something entirely different. A fragrance like fresh petals touched by morning dew. Not overpowering, not artificial, pure, clean, calming. He blinked, trying to locate the source. Ahmed, do you smell something? Ahmed frowned, sniffed the air once, twice. Smell what, Captain? Ayan hesitated. He did not want to sound foolish. Nothing. Maybe I imagined it. But he hadn't imagined it. In fact, the scent seemed to grow clearer, warmer, more comforting, almost as if wrapping him in an invisible embrace. And with it came something else, something even stranger. A sensation. Not external, not physical, but spiritual. A calmness descended on Ayan's heart, so mental, so sudden, so complete, that his breath caught in his throat. The uneasiness he had carried since morning dissolved instantly, replaced by a serenity he had not felt in years. It was the kind of peace that only comes when Allah sends sakina, a tranquility placed directly into a believer's chest. Ayan shifted in his seat. A small breath escaped him. What is happening? He wondered silently. But nothing looked unusual. All instruments normal. Pressure stable, weather perfect. Outside the windows, the sky stretched infinitely clear, as if the world had never known storm or darkness. Inside the cockpit, however, something unseen was unfolding. Ayan placed a hand lightly on his chest, as if checking whether the sensation was real. It was. The peace lingered like a soft whisper from somewhere beyond human understanding. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. Ya Allah, whatever this is, let it be good. But Ayan had no idea. The true test of his life, his faith, his courage, his reliance on Allah had only just begun. Captain Ayan Farid opened his eyes slowly, the lingering wave of tranquility still resting over his heart like a warm blanket. For a moment he wondered if it was simply the peace that comes after prayer. But this felt different, deeper, purposeful, as if it wasn't just peace, but a message wrapped in peace. He glanced at the instruments again. Altitude perfect, fuel levels normal, weather readings stable. Everything reflected the picture of a routine flight. Passengers were calm. Crew members hadn't reported anything unusual. Yet something in the air of the cockpit had undeniably changed. Then it happened. It wasn't a sound in the traditional sense. Not a voice that struck the eardrums. It felt more like a command placed directly inside the chest, bypassing the ears entirely, clear, firm, unmistakable. Descend now! Ayan froze. His hands hovered above the throttle, his breath caught midair. He turned his head slightly, almost expecting someone to be standing behind his seat, but of course there was no one. Ahmed continued reviewing flight parameters, unaware of the shift in Ayan's expression. Captain, maintaining cruise altitude. Everything looks perfect. Perfect. Yes, that was the strange part. Nothing justified a descent. Certainly not a sudden drop from cruising altitude. Pilots were trained to avoid unnecessary movements, especially ones that could alarm passengers. Ayan swallowed. Maybe it was his imagination, stress, or the weight of memories, Hassan's death, the years of emotional exhaustion. Perhaps he was misinterpreting the earlier feeling of tranquility, confusing it with something else, But before he could rationalize it further, it came again. Stronger. Sharper, without hesitation. Descend immediately. Ayan's heart thumped hard. This time his hands trembled slightly. This wasn't a passing thought or a random whisper of conscience. It was more authoritative than that, more urgent. A force that felt beyond himself. A command from the one who controls hearts, skies, destinies. He steadied his breath and spoke calmly. Ahmed, we're initiating descent. Ahmed jerked his head up, startled. Captain, why? There's nothing on the radar. No turbulence alerts, no wind shear warnings, no technical issues. He began checking the instruments again in disbelief. All systems are absolutely normal. I know, Ayan replied, his tone unnervingly composed. But we're descending anyway. But on what grounds, sir? For a moment, Ayan stayed silent. He couldn't say, Allah inspired my heart. Pilots don't talk like that. Aviation manuals don't have a chapter for divine instincts, but faith has its own logic, its own science, its own urgencies. So he simply said, call it precaution. Ahmed hesitated. His hands hovered uncertainly over the communication panel. He respected Ayan deeply, but even respect had limits. This was irrational, unjustified, illogical. But something in the captain's eyes, an intensity, a quiet authority, made him obey. He contacted air traffic control, requesting immediate descent. State your reason, the controller asked. Ayan took the mic. We're receiving inconsistent readings, descending as a precaution. He hated lying, but there was no other way to explain the truth. Cleared to descend, the controller replied. With a slow exhale, Ayan disengaged the autopilot. His hands, steady now, gently pushed the control column forward. The nose of the aircraft dipped slightly, the engines adjusted thrust, and the plane began its controlled descent. As they descended, something astonishing happened. The strange fragrance returned, this time stronger. Almost like a reminder, a reassurance, a confirmation that what he was doing was right. The tranquility in his heart deepened, anchoring his fear. It felt as though Allah himself had placed his protection over the aircraft. Ahmed looked at Ayan, confusion etched across his face. Captain, are you okay? You look like you already know something we don't. Ayan didn't answer. Not yet. Because even he didn't fully understand it. All he knew was this. Something was coming. Something that logic could not predict. And Allah had just directed him to save everyone on board. The descent continued smoothly, but the real storm was only 3 minutes away. The aircraft continued its smooth descent, the altitude numbers ticking downward with steady precision. Captain Ayan Farid kept both hands firm on the controls, his heart strangely calm despite the command he had just obeyed without any rational explanation. He didn't know why he was descending. He only knew he had been guided to do so, guided by the one who never leaves his servants alone. Behind him, 187 passengers sat unaware, sipping drinks, browsing movies, reading books. Flight attendants moved quietly through the aisles, smiling as they answered requests. For them, it was an ordinary flight on an ordinary day. But the unseen reality unfolding in the silence between seconds was anything but ordinary. Captain, Ahmed said again, trying to make sense of the decision. Are you sure everything is okay? Should I run a full system scan? Go ahead, Ayan replied without hesitation. Ahmed nodded and began running diagnostics. One by one, the panels blinked green. Engines, stable. Cabin pressure, normal. Temperature, optimal. External sensors, functioning. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that justified even a hint of emergency. Yet Ayan's pulse had begun to match the rhythm of something he couldn't define. A subtle tightening in his chest, a whisper of urgency, a feeling that time itself was narrowing. And then, it happened. A deafening boom ripped through the aircraft like a giant tearing steel with bare hands. The cockpit shook violently. Warning alarms erupted in a chorus of terrifying shrieks. Red lights flashed across the control panel in a chaotic strobe. Ayan's hand seized the controls instinctively. Ahmed grabbed onto the side panel, eyes wide in shock. Ya Allah, what was that? Ayan didn't answer. He couldn't. His senses surged into sharp, automatic awareness. Years of training compressed into a single moment of purpose. Another violent jolt shook the plane. A split second later, a piercing alarm blared with unmistakable clarity. Cabin decompression, structural failure. Ahmed's face drained of color. Captain, rear roof section, it's gone. Ayan's mind raced. At their original cruising altitude, such an explosion would have killed everyone instantly. The pressure drop alone would have sucked air, objects, and possibly people out into the sky. The structure would have snapped like paper. But they weren't at that altitude anymore because Allah had stopped him, because Allah had moved his heart, because Allah had saved them, before the disaster even happened. Ya Allah, your mercy is beyond our understanding, Ayan whispered under his breath as he fought to stabilize the plane. Oxygen masks deployed throughout the cabin. The aircraft trembled uncontrollably, its metal frame stressed beyond safe limits. Wind roared through the torn opening at the back, creating violent turbulence inside the cabin. Ahmed shouted over the alarms, "Passengers are panicking! We need to get lower! Fast!" "We already are," Ayan said through gritted teeth. "Hold tight!" The plane dipped again as Ayan adjusted the thrust, forcing the aircraft toward a breathable altitude. Every move had to be gentle, calculated. One wrong adjustment, and the compromised structure could snap entirely. "Mayday! Mayday!" Ayan called into the radio. His voice didn't shake. His hands didn't tremble. It was as if a divine calm had wrapped around him, holding him steady in the storm. "We have suffered structural failure, rear roof section destroyed, requesting emergency landing at nearest available airport." The tower responded instantly, voice tight with urgency. "Nearest airport is Doha East, Captain Farid. Runway being cleared, emergency teams on standby?" "We're heading there," Ayan confirmed. Ahmed stared at him in disbelief. "Captain, if you hadn't descended—" Ayan cut him off gently. "I know." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The truth hung in the air between them, powerful and undeniable. The command he heard, the tranquility he felt, the descent he initiated, was not coincidence. It was protection. It was mercy. It was Allah guiding his servant before the sky split open behind them. The aircraft, wounded but still fighting, pushed forward toward Doha. The battle for 187 lives had only just begun. The aircraft shuddered violently as it pushed forward through the thinning sky. Captain Ayan Farid kept a firm grip on the controls, feeling every vibration as if the plane were speaking to him, telling him where it hurt, where it was breaking, where he needed to be gentle. A pilot could hear an aircraft in ways ordinary people couldn't. But today, this wasn't technical hearing. It felt deeper, almost emotional, like the wounded body of the plane was begging to be guided safely to Earth. Wind roared through the torn section at the back, creating chaotic pressure changes. The alarms were still blaring, lights flashing red every second. Yet somehow, miraculously, the aircraft remained stable enough to fly. "Captain, the readings, they're not making sense," Ahmed said, scanning the screens again and again as if expecting them to correct themselves. "The structural damage is too severe. We shouldn't still be airborne." Ayan didn't respond immediately. His eyes focused straight ahead, his heart whispering silent dhikr between breaths. "Subhanallah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah." Ahmed looked at him, desperate for answers. "Captain, how is this plane holding together?" Ayan shifted slightly, tightening his grip on the control column. "Because Allah permitted it," he said quietly, without drama, without hesitation. Ahmed froze. It wasn't the type of answer recorded in flight manuals, but it was the only answer that matched the impossible reality around them. Inside the cabin, flight attendants struggled to calm the passengers. Some were screaming, others crying, some clutching their seats and reciting prayers. A mother held her young daughter tightly, kissing the top of her head again and again. A man whispered Ayat al-Kursi under his breath. A teenage boy covered his face and sobbed silently. Then came the call from the cabin crew. "Captain, we have injuries but no fatalities, and the last row is empty." Ayan's heart clenched. That last row, the very place where the roof had blown apart, had been completely unoccupied. If anyone had been sitting there. He pushed the thought aside. "Understood. Keep everyone calm. We're heading for an emergency landing." He closed the intercom and exhaled deeply. His breath shook slightly, but not from fear. From awe. "Ya Allah, you planned every detail." Beside him, Ahmed wiped his forehead. Sweat dripped down his temples despite the cold air blowing through the cockpit vents. He stared at Ayan. Captain, forgive me for asking, but how did you know? Why did you descend? What did you see? Ayan didn't look at him. His gaze remained fixed ahead. I didn't see anything, he said softly. I felt guided. Guided? By what? Ahmed pressed, incredulous. Ayan swallowed. Words felt too small to explain what had happened. By Allah, he finally said. He placed the decision in my heart before any alarm could warn us. Ahmed stared at him, speechless. It was both terrifying and comforting, the idea that divine intervention had reached into their aircraft, into the heart of a pilot, to save them all. Outside, the sky darkened slightly as clouds formed in the distance. The plane pierced through a thin layer of turbulence, prompting Ayan to adjust the angle with delicate precision. He could not make sudden movements, not with the aircraft wounded the way it was. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. Distance to Doha East, 58 miles, Ahmed reported. Estimated arrival, 14 minutes. 14 minutes. A lifetime. An eternity. Ayan glanced briefly at the shattered warning lights, then back at the sky. Ahmed, he said, voice steady. I need you to remain focused. I need you with me. Ahmed nodded, forcing himself to breathe. I'm here, Captain. Another burst of turbulence rattled the aircraft. The broken metal edges at the rear screeched in protest. Panels vibrated dangerously. Ayan whispered, almost inaudibly. Ya Rabbi, you brought us this far. Do not leave us now. His heart wasn't panicked. It was anchored. Anchored in the belief that the one who controls the skies was still watching, still guiding, still protecting. Behind him, 187 souls trusted him. Above him, the protection of Allah descended like an invisible canopy, and every second forward was a step between life and death. But Ayan wasn't flying alone anymore. The minutes that followed felt like they were suspended on a thin thread between survival and catastrophe. Every mile the aircraft traveled toward Doha East Airport was earned, fought for, paid through turbulence, rattling metal, and the relentless pounding of wind through the torn rear section. Inside the cockpit, the alarms had finally stopped. Not because the danger was gone, but because the system had already reported every emergency it could. The silence that replaced the alarms felt even heavier. Distance, 41 miles, Ahmed announced, his voice still trembling around the edges. Ayan nodded, eyes on the horizon. His hands were steady, but inside him, a tide was rising. A tide of deep, trembling humility. He had flown through electrical storms, sandstorms, hail clouds, and unpredictable wind shears in his career. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to guiding a wounded aircraft held together more by prayer than by metal. Ahmed, Ayan said quietly, I want you to begin preparing the crew for emergency landing. Tell them to brace everyone on my command. Yes, Captain, Ahmed replied, then paused. And what about you? What are you preparing? Ayan exhaled slowly. My heart. There was no fear in his tone, no panic, only acceptance, determination, and the unshakable knowledge that whatever happened next would unfold exactly as Allah decreed. Ahmed swallowed hard, then contacted the cabin crew. Ayan could hear muffled voices through the cockpit door. Orders being given, doors being checked, passengers being instructed to tighten their belts, children being calmed by trembling mothers. The human weight of responsibility pressed deeper into Ayan's chest. He glanced at the shattered panels, then closed his eyes briefly. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is enough for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs. It wasn't just a dua. It was surrender. Trust. A declaration of helplessness and hope intertwined. Outside, the sky shifted hues as they neared the Qatar coast. Wisps of clouds streaked across the blue, and sunlight glimmered off the engine casings. It was strangely beautiful, this fragile flight through the sky where danger and mercy existed side by side. Captain, Ahmed said suddenly, the pressure in the rear section is dropping further. Ayan studied the readings. We need to descend a little more. Keep it gentle. He guided the aircraft downward with extreme precision. Any abrupt movement could cause the cracked fuselage to tear further, He adjusted the angle 2 degrees down, engine thrust reduced by 3%. Small changes, life-saving changes. Passengers may feel the descent, Ahmed warned. They'll survive the discomfort, Ayan replied. We just need to reach the runway. As the plane descended, he felt that strange tranquility return, not in waves, but in a steady stream, almost like reassurance, almost like an unseen force placing a hand on his shoulder. Captain? Ahmed asked softly. Why aren't you afraid? Ayan blinked, surprised by the question. Who said I'm not? You seem calm. Ayan finally looked at him. Fear is natural, Ahmed, but when a believer knows he's done everything in his power and the rest is in Allah's hands, the heart finds peace. Ahmed stared at him, absorbing every word. The radio crackled. Flight 734, runway clear, emergency units in position. Winds mild. You are cleared for immediate landing. Ayan responded, Understood, approaching. He took a deep breath. This was it. No simulations, no training manuals, no second chances. This was where skill met fate, where human effort collided with divine decree. Ahmed, he said, inform the cabin. Tell them to brace. Ahmed made the announcement. In the back, passengers tightened their belts. Some held hands. Some whispered last-minute duas. Others closed their eyes and surrendered to whatever was coming. Ayan adjusted the flaps. The aircraft jolted again, but still held together. The runway lights appeared in the distance, thin lines of hope glowing through the haze. Captain, Ahmed whispered, voice cracking. May Allah guide your hands. Ayan didn't take his eyes off the runway. He already has, he replied. And with that, the final approach began. The runway stretched ahead like a lifeline drawn across the earth. Straight, steady, waiting. Captain Ayan Farid lowered his chin slightly, exhaled once, and tightened his grip on the controls. Every instinct in his body sharpened. Every muscle prepared. Every prayer he had ever whispered seemed to rise inside his heart at the same time. Behind him, 187 people braced for impact. Some recited Subhanallah, others repeated La ilaha illallah. Some whispered their children's names, and some simply cried. In the cockpit, however, there was silence. An intense, focused quiet. The kind of silence where destinies balance on the edge of seconds. Speed holding steady, Ahmed reported, voice trembling but controlled. Flaps full, Ayan commanded. Flaps full. The aircraft shook violently as the flaps deployed, the damaged structure straining against the change. The torn metal in the rear screeched like an injured beast. For a terrifying moment, the entire plane tilted slightly to the left. Steady, steady, Ayan murmured, gently correcting the angle. The runway lights grew larger, brighter. Emergency crews lined the asphalt, fire trucks, ambulances, rescue teams all holding their breath as the wounded aircraft descended. Airspeed dropping to ideal, Ahmed confirmed. Ayan narrowed his eyes. Landing gear. Deploying now. The lever clicked, and the gear mechanism whirred. A second passed, 2, 3, then clunk. Fully deployed. Ahmed let out a shaky breath. Gear locked. Ayan whispered under his breath, Alhamdulillah. The plane roared downward, wind screaming through the torn fuselage. The cockpit vibrated as if resisting his guidance, but Ayan held firm, managing each subtle adjustment with surgical precision. He didn't dare move too sharply. One wrong action could tear the rear section completely apart. Altitude 200 feet, Ahmed reported. Ayan's heart thudded once, deep and loud. Visibility was perfect. Blue sky above, the tan earth beneath, and a strip of hope straight ahead. 100 feet! Passengers screamed as the aircraft dipped slightly, then stabilized again. 50 feet! Ayan swallowed. Everything inside him aligned. Skill, training, faith. Bismillah, he whispered. The wheels touched the runway. Not gently, not smoothly, but safely. A violent shudder tore through the aircraft as the tires screeched against the asphalt. The rear of the plane dragged unevenly, sparks shooting briefly from the torn metal section. Alarms blared again. Loose panels rattled. Oxygen masks swung like pendulums above terrified passengers. Ayan forced the throttle back, engaging reverse thrust. The plane jerked, slowed, jerked again, but still held together. The runway rushed past in blurs of yellow paint and emergency lights. Every second of deceleration felt like an hour. Come on, come on, Ayan muttered, fighting physics, gravity, and fear all at once. Finally, the plane stopped. A final groan of metal echoed, and then silence. Pure, breathtaking silence. For a moment, no one moved. The aircraft, battered and trembling, rested like a wounded survivor finally collapsing after reaching safety. Ayan's hands were still gripping the controls. He stared ahead, chest rising and falling in deep breaths. Ahmed looked at him, tears forming in his eyes. "Captain," his voice broke, "we made it." Ayan didn't speak. His throat was too tight. Instead, his eyes lifted upward. "Ya Rab, you are the one who saves." Behind them, the cabin erupted, not in panic, but in sobs of relief. People cried, hugged, fell into sujood between the aisles. Others repeated Alhamdulillah over and over, unable to stop. Flight attendants opened the doors, emergency slides deployed. Passengers evacuated in controlled urgency, guided by rescue crews waiting outside. Ayan unbuckled slowly. His legs felt weak, almost foreign. He stood only because Allah gave him strength. Ahmed walked beside him as they moved through the cabin. Then Ayan saw it. The last row. The one torn open to the sky. The seats shredded, metal bent outward, wind still rushing through the gap. And every seat was empty. Ayan's eyes filled. His heart trembled. He whispered the only words he could. "Subhanallah, you saved them all." When Captain Ayan Farid finally stepped out of the aircraft, the hot Doha sunlight hit his face, but he barely felt it. His legs trembled as though he were walking on a ship in rough seas. Rescue workers approached, asking about injuries, checking for shock, offering support. But their voices were distant, muffled, almost unreal. Ayan nodded mechanically, answered their questions, remained composed. Pilots are trained to stay calm, even after catastrophe, but nothing in his training had prepared him for divine intervention. The wrecked plane stood behind him, a testimony to the impossible. The entire rear fuselage was shredded, ripped open like paper. Investigators took pictures, shook their heads, whispered among themselves. One engineer muttered, "This aircraft should not have made it to the runway, not in this state." Ayan heard him, and his heart whispered, "It didn't make it because of us. It made it because of Allah." Hours later, after debriefings, reports, and medical checks, the airline placed him and co-pilot Ahmed on a commercial flight back home. It felt strange, sitting as a passenger after surviving the most terrifying flight of his life. The hum of the engines was soft. The cabin quiet. Nothing unusual. Yet every few moments, Ayan would close his eyes and feel again the tranquility that had come before the disaster. The fragrance, the command in his heart, the sense of protection wrapping around him like a shield. Ahmed, sitting beside him, finally asked the question that had been burning inside him. "Captain, what do you think really happened today?" Ayan looked out the window. Clouds drifted across a golden sky. What happened was mercy. Ahmed waited. Ayan continued, voice low but firm. "Allah guided my heart before the danger revealed itself. That is the only explanation." Ahmed absorbed this slowly. He had always believed in Allah, but today he had witnessed Allah's protection in the most literal sense. When the plane landed back home, night had fallen. The airport was quieter than usual. Ayan walked through the arrival gates with steps that felt too heavy and too light at the same time. Heavy with exhaustion, light with gratitude. Then he saw her. Mariam. She stood near the barrier, hijab slightly uneven, eyes swollen from crying, hands trembling the moment she recognized him. The instant their eyes met, she broke into a run. Ayan opened his arms and she collided into him, clinging as if she were holding on to life itself. "Ayan," she whispered, breath hitching. "Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. You're safe." Ayan held her tight, burying his face into her shoulder. For the first time since the landing, his composure cracked. His breath shuddered. Tears, silent, heavy tears, escaped him. Mariam felt them and held him even closer. They stood like that for a long time, not speaking, just breathing the same air, sharing the same miracle. Finally, she pulled back slightly, cupped his face, and whispered, "Come home. Please." They drove back in silence. The city lights passed by like blurs of gold and white. When they reached home, their two children rushed down the stairs with cries of joy. "Baba!" Ayan knelt, opening his arms. Both children crashed into him, hugging tightly from both sides. Ayan kissed their heads, inhaling the scent of their hair, whispering, "Alhamdulillah. Allah protected me because of your mother's du'as, and yours too." They sat together in the living room. Ayan recounted the entire incident. The fragrance, the feeling of sakina, the heart command to descend, the explosion, the impossible survival. Miriam listened without interruption, hands trembling in her lap. Her eyes filled again, but she didn't blink them away. When he finished, she lowered her gaze and spoke in a voice so soft he barely heard it. "Ayan, I need to tell you something." He looked at her. She took a shaky breath. "The moment your flight took off today, I felt something strange, a heaviness, a fear I couldn't explain. So I prayed, long, hard, with tears." She paused, swallowing. "And at almost that exact time, I asked Allah, 'Ya Rab, place your protection around Ayan. Guide his heart if anything happens.'" Ayan's breath stopped. The command, the scent, the sakina, the timing, everything aligned. Everything pointed to the same truth. Allah had answered her dua in real time, guiding her husband's heart before catastrophe struck. Ayan reached for her hand and held it with both of his. "Mariam, your dua saved 187 lives today." Her tears fell freely, and for the first time in years, Ayan felt a new emotion rising inside him. Not fear, not grief, but humble, overwhelming gratitude. He whispered, "Alhamdulillah, for a Lord who listens." The house was quiet after the children went upstairs, but the silence between Ayan and Miriam was not empty. It felt full of realization, full of truth, full of something that had been missing in Ayan's heart for years. He sat on the sofa, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together as though he were holding the weight of everything that had happened. Miriam sat beside him, her fingers gently tracing a line on his arm, grounding him in the moment. She had always been his calm after the turbulence of life. Tonight, however, she felt like more than calm. She felt like the vessel through which Allah had sent mercy. Ayan finally spoke, voice trembling. "Mariam, I thought I had faith. I prayed, yes. I believed, yes. But today I realized something." He swallowed, searching for words. "I realized that I was living with faith in my mind, not in my heart." Miriam watched him, knowing this moment mattered more than any detail of the accident. Ayan continued, "When Hassan died, something inside me broke. I stopped expecting mercy. I stopped hoping for miracles. I kept praying, but not fully, not with surrender. I was scared to trust again." His voice cracked. "But today, Allah showed me that His mercy does not depend on my strength. It comes even when I am weak." Tears filled Miriam's eyes again, but this time they were not from fear. They were from witnessing her husband finally finding the peace he had been denied for years. Ayan leaned back, head resting against the sofa. He stared at the ceiling. "When I felt that tranquility, that sakina, it wasn't imagination. It wasn't instinct. It was Allah placing guidance directly into my heart." He placed a hand on his chest. "I didn't descend because of training. I descended because Allah told me to. Not with words, not with a voice, bam, but with certainty." Miriam whispered, "And I prayed at that exact moment." Ayan closed his eyes, overwhelmed. "Yes, your dua reached Allah before the danger reached us." He fell silent for a few seconds, listening to the ticking of the wall clock. Every tick felt like a heartbeat, steady, restored, alive. Then he said something Miriam wasn't expecting. "Mariam, I want to change." She looked at him, puzzled. "Change what?" "My life, my priorities, how I see the world, how I treat every breath." He turned toward her, his expression sincere and open. "I want to live as someone who knows Allah saved him, Someone who remembers. Someone who is grateful. In everything. Miriam's eyes softened. Ayan, Allah already loves your heart. He only wanted you to see it. Ayan smiled faintly. And I want to earn that love every day. He reached for her hand again. You saved me. No, she whispered. Allah did. I only asked him to. He nodded, humbled by the truth of her words. Later that night, after Miriam slept, Ayan walked quietly to the prayer room. The small space was dimly lit, the prayer mat neatly folded in the corner, the Quran resting on the wooden stand. He sat down cross-legged and looked at the Quran for a long time before placing his hand gently on its cover. Ayan bowed his head. For the first time in years, tears of pure surrender pooled in his eyes. He whispered, Ya Allah, you brought me back when I was lost. You guided me when I doubted myself. You saved lives because you are Ar-Rahman. Ya Rab, I return to you with a heart more alive than ever. He opened the Quran. The first verse his eyes fell upon was, And whoever relies upon Allah, then he is sufficient for him. Quran 65:3. The words pierced him with both sweetness and truth. They were not just ink on paper. They were his lived experience. He bowed down in sujud. Not rushed, not mechanical, but long, deep, grateful. The kind of sujud that transforms a man. Outside, the night was silent. Inside the home of Captain Ayan Farid, a heart had finally returned to its creator with full sincerity. And the miracle of that day continued. Not in the sky, not in the aircraft, but in the rebirth of faith inside one man's soul. The next morning, the sunlight streaming through the curtains felt different to Captain Ayan Farid. Brighter, softer, warmer. It was as though the world itself had been washed clean overnight, and perhaps, in a way, it had. He rose before the alarm, performed wudu, and stood for Fajr with a heart so open, so light, that even he could hardly recognize himself. Every verse he recited felt alive. Every movement in prayer felt meaningful. When he placed his forehead on the ground, he was no longer praying out of habit or duty, but out of pure gratitude. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. He whispered the words again and again, as if trying to offer back even a fraction of the mercy he had been given. When he finished, he sat on the prayer mat for a long moment, letting the quiet settle inside his soul. He wasn't the same man who had left home the day before, burdened, conflicted, doubting. That man was gone. In his place was someone who had witnessed Allah's protection in the sky, who had felt divine guidance carved into his heart, who had seen 187 lives saved by a decision no logic could justify, but faith could. Miriam entered the room quietly. She watched him with a soft smile, the kind that had carried him through storms he never admitted to. You look peaceful, she said gently. He nodded. I am. She knelt beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. You didn't sleep much. I didn't need to, he replied, smiling. For years I've been carrying weight I didn't know how to release. Yesterday, Allah took it off my heart. Tears welled in Miriam's eyes again, but this time they were the tears of someone witnessing a long-awaited victory. Later that day, Ayan went to the airline headquarters for official evaluations. He was greeted like a hero. News of the miraculous landing had already begun spreading among the staff. Engineers described the aircraft damage in disbelief. This plane should have disintegrated midair, one of them said, shaking his head. Captain, what you did, it defies aviation science. Ayan simply smiled. I didn't do it alone. His colleagues exchanged looks, assuming he meant teamwork. Only a few understood the depth behind his words. After hours of reports, debriefings, and medical clearance, Ayan was finally allowed to return to flying. But he did not rush. He spent time in reflection, in prayer, in realigning his heart. He knew that returning to the skies now meant something entirely different. Flying was no longer a job. It was a trust, a responsibility, an act of gratitude. 6 weeks later, on his first flight back, he walked into the cockpit with a new kind of confidence. Not arrogance, far from it. It was the confidence of someone who had surrendered to Allah completely. Someone who knew that no matter how high he flew, he was always under the protection of the one who created the sky itself. Ahmed joined him with a grin. Ready for another smooth one? Ayan returned the smile. Insha'Allah. Before they started the engines, Ayan closed his eyes for a moment. His lips moved quietly. Bismillah, Ya Allah, guide my hands, steady my heart, and protect everyone on this journey. He opened his eyes and felt that familiar peace settle inside him again. The kind that needed no explanation. As the plane moved down the runway and lifted into the sky, Ayan felt no fear, no doubt. Only trust. Only gratitude. Only awe at the way Allah writes destinies with precision more perfect than any flight computer. Weeks passed, then months, and Ayan noticed something beautiful. He was different at home. More gentle, more patient, more present. He was different in the air, more aware, more thankful. He was different in prayer, more sincere. Mariam often caught him pausing mid-conversation to whisper a quiet Alhamdulillah under his breath. It made her heart warm every time. One quiet evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Mariam said, "Do you ever think about that day in the sky?" Ayan looked at her, eyes soft. "Every day. Not with fear, but with gratitude." She nodded. "Allah saved you." "Allah saved all of us," he corrected gently. "And he saved my heart too." He reached for her hand, holding it with deep affection. "At 36,000 feet, Allah showed me that he is closer than we think, that he hears the du'as whispered by a wife far below, that he guides even the trembling hands of a pilot in an impossible moment." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world gold and crimson. Ayan whispered, "And if Allah is with you, then no sky is too high, no danger too great, and no moment beyond hope." And in that peaceful silence, he finally understood. The true miracle wasn't surviving the sky. The true miracle was discovering the heart that had always been watched over by its creator. Alhamdulillah.